Hi friends, in this video I'm going to teach you how to make 48 sentences using a verb. We are going to take a verb, we are going to make it into a sentence, and from that sentence we are going to make 48 sentences. Similarly, we have taken 5 verbs in this video and we are going to practice all the 5, that is 480 into 5 is going to be 240 sentences. Why these 240 sentences? When we practice these 240 sentences, naturally our vocal cords will open and the words will come out freely from your mouth to speak fluent English. That is the main intention. Added to that, you are going to learn how to pronounce words, how to make sentences, you are going to build your vocabulary, and you are also going to gain confidence. Now let me begin with the verb read. The sentence is Gulnaz reads the Quran. Let me make 48 sentences out of it. Gulnaz reads the Quran. Gulnaz doesn't read the Quran. Does Gulnaz read the Quran? Doesn't Gulnaz read the Quran? Gulnaz read the Quran. Gulnaz didn't read the Quran. Did Gulnaz read the Quran? Didn't Gulnaz read the Quran? Gulnaz will read the Quran. Gulnaz won't read the Quran. Will Gulnaz read the Quran? Won't Gulnaz read the Quran? Gulnaz is reading the Quran. Gulnaz isn't reading the Quran. Is Gulnaz reading the Quran? Isn't Gulnaz reading the Quran? Gulnaz was reading the Quran. Gulnaz wasn't reading the Quran. Was Gulnaz reading the Quran? Wasn't Gulnaz reading the Quran? Gulnaz will be reading the Quran. Gulnaz won't be reading the Quran. Will Gulnaz be reading the Quran? Won't Gulnaz be reading the Quran? Gulnaz has read the Quran. Gulnaz hasn't read the Quran. Has Gulnaz read the Quran? Hasn't Gulnaz read the Quran? Gulnaz had read the Quran. Gulnaz hadn't read the Quran. Had Gulnaz read the Quran? Hadn't Gulnaz read the Quran? Gulnaz will have read the Quran. Gulnaz won't have read the Quran. Will Gulnaz have read the Quran? Won't Gulnaz have read the Quran? Gulnaz has been reading the Quran. Gulnaz hasn't been reading the Quran. Has Gulnaz been reading the Quran? Hasn't Gulnaz been reading the Quran? Gulnaz had been reading the Quran. Gulnaz hadn't been reading the Quran. Had Gulnaz been reading the Quran? Hadn't Gulnaz been reading the Quran? Gulnaz will have been reading the Quran. Gulnaz won't have been reading the Quran. Will Gulnaz have been reading the Quran? Won't Gulnaz have been reading the Quran? Let's go to the second verb. The second verb is ride. I ride bikes. I don't ride bikes. Do you ride bikes? Don't you ride bikes? I rode bikes. I didn't ride bikes. Did you ride bikes? Didn't you ride bikes? I will ride bikes. I won't ride bikes. Will you ride bikes? Won't you ride bikes? I am riding bikes. I amn't riding bikes. Are you riding bikes? Aren't you riding bikes? I was riding bikes. I wasn't riding bikes. Were you riding bikes? Weren't you riding bikes? I will be riding bikes. I won't be riding bikes. Will you be riding bikes? Won't you be riding bikes? I have ridden bikes. I haven't ridden bikes. Have you ridden bikes? Haven't you ridden bikes? I had ridden bikes. I hadn't ridden bikes. Had you ridden bikes? Hadn't you ridden bikes? I will have ridden bikes. I won't have ridden bikes. Will you have ridden bikes? Won't you have ridden bikes? I have been riding bikes. I haven't been riding bikes. Have you been riding bikes? Haven't you been riding bikes? I had been riding bikes. I hadn't been riding bikes. Had you been riding bikes? Hadn't you been riding bikes? I will have been riding bikes. I won't have been riding bikes. Will you have been riding bikes? Won't you have been riding bikes? That takes us to the third verb. What is this third verb? Ring. We ring bells. We don't ring bells. Do you ring bells? Don't you ring bells? We rang bells. We didn't ring bells. Did you ring bells? Didn't you ring bells? We will ring bells. We won't ring bells. Will you ring bells? Won't you ring bells? We are ringing bells. We aren't ringing bells. Are you ringing bells? Aren't you ringing bells? We were ringing bells. We weren't ringing bells. Were you ringing bells? Weren't you ringing bells? We will be ringing bells. We won't be ringing bells. Will you be ringing bells? Won't you be ringing bells? We have rung bells. We haven't rung bells. Have you rung bells? Haven't you rung bells? We had rung bells. We hadn't rung bells. Had you rung bells? Hadn't you rung bells? We will have rung bells. We won't have rung bells. Will you have rung bells? Won't you have rung bells? We have been ringing bells. We haven't been ringing bells. Have you been ringing bells? Haven't you been ringing bells? We had been ringing bells. We hadn't been ringing bells. Had you been ringing bells? Hadn't you been ringing bells? We will have been ringing bells. We won't have been ringing bells. Will you have been ringing bells? Won't you have been ringing bells? That takes us to the fourth one. The fourth one is rise. She rises above all. She doesn't rise above all. Does she rise above all? Doesn't she rise above all? She rose above all. She didn't rise above all. Did she rise above all? Didn't she rise above all? She will rise above all. She won't rise above all. Will she rise above all? Won't she rise above all? She is rising above all. She isn't rising above all. Is she rising above all? Isn't she rising above all? She was rising above all. She wasn't rising above all. Was she rising above all? Wasn't she rising above all? She will be rising above all. She won't be rising above all. Will she be rising above all? Won't she be rising above all? She has risen above all. She hasn't risen above all. Has she risen above all? Hasn't she risen above all? She had risen above all. She hadn't risen above all. Had she risen above all? Hadn't she risen above all? She will have risen above all. She won't have risen above all. Will she have risen above all? Won't she have risen above all? She has been rising above all. She hasn't been rising above all. Has she been rising above all? Hasn't she been rising above all? She had been rising above all. She hadn't been rising above all. Had she been rising above all? Hadn't she been rising above all? She will have been rising above all. She won't have been rising above all. Will she have been rising above all? Won't she have been rising above all? That takes us to the last one. The last verb is run. It runs fast. It doesn't run fast. Does it run fast? Doesn't it run fast? It ran fast. It didn't run fast. Did it run fast? Didn't it run fast? It will run fast. It won't run fast. Will it run fast? Won't it run fast? It is running fast. It isn't running fast. Is it running fast? Isn't it running fast? It was running fast. It wasn't running fast. Was it running fast? Wasn't it running fast? It will be running fast. It won't be running fast. Will it be running fast? Won't it be running fast? It has run fast. It hasn't run fast. Has it run fast? Hasn't it run fast? It had run fast. It hadn't run fast. Had it run fast? Hadn't it run fast? It will have run fast. It won't have run fast. Will it have run fast? Won't it have run fast? It has been running fast. It hasn't been running fast. Has it been running fast? Hasn't it been running fast? It had been running fast. It hadn't been running fast. Had it been running fast? Hadn't it been running fast? It will have been running fast. It won't have been running fast. Will it have been running fast? Won't it have been running fast? Here we have covered exactly 240 sentences. And imagine when you practice 240 sentences, say in every video, you're going to practice a lot. And what will happen? You're going to gain a lot of confidence to speak fluent English. You can easily ask questions and you can easily answer questions. In my next video, I'm going to add 5 more verbs. You please click on that and keep practicing. The more verbs you're going to practice, the more English you're going to speak. The more your vocabulary is going to be built more. So I want you to just keep on practicing and practicing and practicing. Listen to the pronunciation, listen to the accent. I'm not using the British accent or the American accent. I'm just using the neutral accent which is accepted all over the world. If you can do that, it's going to help you a lot. All the best. Friends, you may subscribe to my channel in YouTube. To subscribe, please press here. Follow me on Twitter by clicking here. Want to follow me on Facebook? Click here to like my page.